Good morning. Apart from being the sixth Sunday of Easter and the Sunday before Ascension Day, which incidentally we're marking this year with choral evensong in Compton Beecham, details of that service are on the weekly sheets and on the websites. Today is what we believe is the first ever National Bell Sunday. Now, in this benefice, we might think that every Sunday is Bell Sunday, but that's only because we are richly blessed in having 3 active bell towers, which do ring every Sunday and have regular practices. Many churches do not, and a lot of those that did have not been able to return to regular ringing, having lost people and skills during the pandemic. Despite Tony Crabtree's best efforts, I will never make a bell ringer. But I know that it takes a lot of time, effort and confidence to be one. And the loss of confidence seems to have been particularly difficult to overcome, and people have been slow to return to their towers. As I said, we are very blessed to have active towers which see teaching and support for other churches as part of their mission. And St Mary's Longcott in particular is much appreciated as a source of teaching and support. Which reminds me, at 2 o'clock this afternoon, a group of young ringers will be visiting Longcott to learn more about how bells work and, of course, to ring, both the tower bells and the mini ring which Tony Crabtree uses to encourage new ringers. I nearly said young ringers, but Tony would say you are never too old to learn. It's about technique, not strength. Why are we doing this now? That, I'm afraid, I don't know, though it's probably long overdue. But the answer to why today is because it's a Sunday close to the feast of the patron saint of bell ringers, St Dunstan. Dunstan was Abbot of Glastonbury and Archbishop of Canterbury in the 10th century. But he was also a man of infinite curiosity, said to explore with critical scrutiny the books of other wise men, and to be a skilled investigator of all useful things. What a wonderful way to be remembered. A skilled investigator of all useful things. These included writing, playing the harp, painting, and forging bells as a way of calling people to worship, or, if they were working in the fields and unable to get to church, a reminder to stop what they were doing and pause for prayer, which of course bells still do, as well as marking significant events in the lives of individuals, like weddings, and also significant events in the life of the nation, like ringing for the King's coronation last weekend. It would have been lovely and made preachers' lives a lot easier if the reading set for this morning had linked more obviously to bell ringing. I spent a lot of time yesterday staring at the windows, trying to find some connection, doing almost anything other than getting on with the sermon, before it came to me that St Paul might have been doing much the same, standing in front of the Areopagus and wondering what to say to the Athenians. The Areopagus is, or was, a rock somewhere to the northwest of the Acropolis. But it also gave its name to the Athenian Governing Council, which, I gathered, tried cases pertaining to religious matters, as well as murder, wounding, and setting fire to olive trees. We don't know whether St Paul was actually on trial, or whether the council was merely interested in what he had to say. And that would have been reasonable. The Athenians were well known for their intellectual curiosity, a bit like St Dunstan when you come to think about it, and would spend their time in nothing but telling or hearing something new. I could imagine St Paul looking around for inspiration much as I was, searching for the words which would tell his hearers the truth he believed they needed to know, the good news of Jesus Christ. and he found his inspiration in an altar to an unknown god. Perhaps it was a respectful addition to ensure the Athenians didn't miss out or offend any of the deities. Or perhaps it was a sign that, for all they had, the Athenians were still spiritually restless and uncertain. Perhaps, too, it was this passage that St. Augustine had in mind when he wrote, "Our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you," some 200 years later. Angela Tilby wrote in this week's Church Times that St. Paul must have warmed the hearts of his hearers with his courtesy and respect, as he sought out what was good in what to him was essentially other. Paul took the trouble to observe and reflect. He talked to the crowd in a way that made them feel heard and understood rather than alienated. And then he was able to show them that Jesus was not just one of many gods, but the one true God in whom we live and move and have our being. And then to speak of the resurrection. For some reason, the lectionary hasn't given us the 3 verses which follow today's gospel passage. So here they are. When they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some scoffed, but others said, "We will hear you again about this." At that point, St. Paul left them, but some of them joined him and became believers, including Dionysius the Areopagite and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. Even St. Paul doesn't convince everyone all the time. That's encouraging for all of us as we seek to speak God's truth into a world which still seems happy to have an assortment of gods to worship and leave space for the unknown gods as a token gesture to avoid giving offence. However, we do have to offer something which fills that gap in people's lives. But we also have to take care that we don't water down God's truth and reduce him to one of the crowd. And I think the way we do that is by keeping Jesus' commandment to love and by being open to the Spirit, who will always give us the words we need when we're talking of holy things. It's not just what we say, it's the way we say it. Again, this week, Angela Tilby pointed out that by describing the Spirit as an advocate, Jesus was talking about a lawyer for the defence, one whose task it is to plead a case to God on behalf of guilty humanity, calling for judgment to be tempered with mercy, because we are all God's children. If we want people to hear the good news, it has to sound like good news, not condemnation. So like St. Paul, we should be meeting people where they are and then walking with them on their faith journey to where they need to be. In one sense, we've come a long way from the bell ringing with which I started. But in another, we've come full circle, because the sound of the bells also reaches out to people wherever they are and whatever they're doing, and calls them into God's presence. Sometimes preachers have to have the humility to recognise that, to be silent, and let the bells, as Tennyson wrote, ring in the valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land. Ring in the Christ that is to be.